Making 40. Give me a critique of Adam Curtis. So the paranoid style in Adam Curtis. So I think Adam Curtis is totally useless. I think you'll understand less about reality than if you've never looked at an Adam Curtis video. I think people who praise Adam Curtis tend to be the same type of people who praise Malcolm Gladwell, right? Adam Curtis is useless. He's useless. Pointless. His films choreograph archive footage, charismatic pop, and portentous commentary in pursuit of a dark, totalizing narrative or the seduction of conspiracy theory without the substance. So filmmaker and a journalist, Adam Curtis has been working at the BBC since 1980. He's made more than 20 films and TV series that exploit his unfettered access to the BBC archives. So in them, he stitches together previously shot footage to explore, in an open-ended and seductive style, historical figures and ideas, terrorism, various demented elites, and Putin. His first major series, Pandora's Box, won him an award in 1993. His 2002 series, The Century of the Self, examines the connections between Freud, public relations, and political polling. His most recent film, the 6-part, 8-hour Can't Get You Out of My Head, subtitled An Emotional History of the Modern World, was released in February. So, to give you a flavor of what to expect, Episode 1, Bloodshed on Wolf Mountain, begins with a world-encompassing bill of goods. We are living through strange days. No, we are living through strange days. These films are a history of how we got to this place and why both those in power and we find it so difficult to move on. They will trace different forces across the world that have led to now, not just in the West, but in China and Russia as well, and they are told in a different way. They are an emotional history of what went on inside the heads of all kinds of people, because in the age of the individual, what you felt, what you wanted, what you dreamed of were going to become the driving force across the world. And to understand the present, you have to go back and see what happened when those dreams and hopes and uncertainties inside people's minds met the much older forces of power, often power that was decaying and desperate to keep its ascendancy. These strange days did not just happen. We and those in power created them together. So this latest series, like the ones before it, examines the failures of states and Big Tent philosophies and the sad state of the unattached individual, who, with nothing but the roomy shawl of individualism as cover, must fail. So if you are satisfied by having a bunch of historical nuggets loaded into a cage and shaken to no particular end, you might agree that Adam Curtis is amazing. I mean, I have no idea how Curtis meant to connect Zheng Qing, that was Mao's wife, Tupac Shakur, Michael de Freitas, Joan Baez, Arthur Sackler, Sandra Paul, Bernard Kushner, Julia Grant, and the Bader-Meinhof Group, and a dozen others, all at a narrative or conceptual level, yet here they all are. So both Adam Curtis and I like popular music and empty hallways, but my relationship to his work can be fairly described as an aversion. Other non-believers have described his work as incoherent. The politics of Adam Curtis's films do not bother me, because his work does not display the consistent, perceptible act of choice that constitutes political engagement. If his movies were presented as some kind of fever dream collage, I might like them. Adam Curtis vexes me because of his paranoid writing, a method that introduces a soft and acidic coagulant into any discussion. His commentaries destroy the cellular structure of ideas with a terminal vagueness that lulls me into a fitful sleep. Okay.
Lawmakers who have been right all along, right? That you've been vaccinated, you don't need to wear a mask, even if Democrats give you a hard time. Let me see what they're saying.
Yeah, when I'm talking to the TV camera, I'm not going to wear a mask, and all of us have been immunized. You're welcome to step away if you like.
And you're telling people that have had the vaccine, who have immunity, you're defying everything we know about immunity by telling people to wear a mask who've been vaccinated.
No. I also think it's a problem where you're telling people to get vaccine, and yet people that have been vaccinated for months are wearing 2 masks.
It's Neanderthal thinking, right? For what seems like the first time in a long time, the federal government is trying to put freedom back in the hands of Americans.
What we're really doing is empowering individuals to make decisions about their own health. So if you are vaccinated and you are making the decision to take off your mask, then you've made the decision to get vaccinated and you are safe. If you are unvaccinated, then you have made the decision to take that risk.
Okay, we said that 6 months ago, but I'll take it now. That is, of course, unless you live in these states. Not listening to the CDC suddenly is New York, New Jersey, California, North Carolina, Washington, Massachusetts, and Hawaii. They have yet to lift their mask mandates. Why? Even Michigan's Gretchen Whitmer, who never met a lockdown she didn't like or wanted to implement, is following the science. And governors like New York's Andrew Cuomo don't care about the science or good policy. They care about control. They want to make it all about them. Remember when Cuomo had that brilliant statement about trashing the vaccine because President Trump commissioned it? He's been wrong on the pandemic time and time again.
We don't even think it's going to be as bad as it was in other countries. We are fully coordinated. We are fully mobilized. We have been ahead of this from day one. From day one. Why did the state do that with COVID patients in nursing home? It's because the state followed President Trump's CDC guidance. So they should ask President Trump. I've always followed CDC guidance, and I think it makes sense.
I won't miss any of those press conferences. Democrats and the media have been constantly wrong at the pandemic from the jump, not only on lockdowns and restrictions, but on its origins. Remember how people were laughed at, called racist, conspiracy theorists for questioning whether the COVID vaccine or the COVID disease came from a Chinese lab. Now, we've got a huge story today, an admission from the top scientists maybe in the world that COVID very well could have escaped from that Wuhan Institute of Virology. Yeah, a letter from 18 respected biologists, including Dr. Richard Barrick, who I was referring to, who work with the researchers in Wuhan, writing this: theories of accidental release from a lab and zoonotic spillover both remain viable. So in English, that means it's entirely possible that this global pandemic that has killed millions, 500,000 here plus, crashed the global economy, still has, was a preventable disaster. Joining us now, a man who's been all over the story from the beginning. I watch him on Sundays, and host of The Next Revolution. You know him, Steve Hilton. Lara Logan is here, host of Lara Logan Has No Agenda on Fox Nation. Took a time out from getting ready.
Okay, so here's a great little mockumentary on Adam Curtis. This is a story about the rise of a large documentary and how the media.
This is a short film about a documentary filmmaker who made critically lauded programs for the BBC, and about how, along the way, he proved that style always triumphs over substance.
Wherever you find them, friendly people, gracious customs, both mean true hospitality, today, tomorrow, and all through the years to come.
In 1992, a strange and brilliant That's Life researcher with a Skinny Puppy CD embarked upon a career of producing documentaries about how ideas can spark social movements. Adam Curtis believed that 200,000 Guardian readers watching BBC Two could change the world. But this was a fantasy. In fact, he had created the televisual equivalent of a drunken late-night Wikipedia binge with pretensions to narrative coherence. Combining archived documentary material with interviews, Curtis filled in the gaps by vomiting grainy library footage onto the screen to a soundtrack of Brian Eno and Nine Inch Nails. He had discovered that it did not matter what footage he used, so long as he changed the shot so bewilderingly fast that the audience didn't notice the chasm between argument and conclusion. This was especially effective when he simply cut the music mid-bar. And as a result, Thabo Mbeki was swept to power at the next general election. Meanwhile, in America, a strange and brilliant cameraman was shooting stock footage of Death Valley, California. Curtis implied that this was somehow relevant to the labyrinthine argument he was constructing. His audience believed that it would turn out to be of crucial significance. But this was a fantasy. Curtis never returned to Death Valley, or the cameraman. He had discovered that they did not matter, because 5 minutes later, his audience had simply forgotten about them. But this did not matter, because Curtis spoke with such an impeccable, authoritative BBC manner that the audience took even gross generalizations and unsupported value judgments to be the absolute truth. They simply went along with it. And thanks to Adam Curtis, Brian Eno never had to work again.
Okay, good takedown there of Adam Curtis, but a longer one in the New York Review of Books. I think I recently subscribed for $10 and I get unlimited access to about 70 years of archives, which I'm slowly going through. One wonders how Curtis imagines he can deliver an emotional history of what went on inside the heads of all kinds of people when the people in question are all dead. Mind reading or the assigning of intentionality is a cardinal sin in journalism. And Adam Curtis has always told anybody who asks him that he is a journalist. This is not a minor assertion, as it seems that his movies are taken seriously for this reason precisely, because they assert the facticity of journalism. Haven't used facticity in a while. I'm so thrilled to be able to use it today. Wow, I'm punching my card in the elite. Adam Curtis lays his archival bits end to end. It's concatenation. Haven't used that word in a while. But placing things in a row produces a montage, something that is neither an essay, a thing that he claims to be presenting, nor an analysis. This reminds me of criticism that I often get, that I cut and paste like long, lengthy excerpts with very little connective tissue and just like slop it up here and don't explain what the hell's going on. One prominent member of his cast this time around is Michael de Freitas. When we meet him, de Freitas is a low-level enforcer for a London slumlord named Peter Rackman, a figure who becomes, quote, hated with an overwhelming disgust as the fate of evil. De Freitas, a very nice black man, goes on to be a figure in the British Black Power movement. He calls himself Michael X, where he flees England and arranges to have a woman stabbed to death. Now, what de Freitas represents is never clear, but it hardly matters. The sordid trumps the logical. How sordid? Adam Curtis mentions two suicides during the course of Can't Get You Out of My Head, Edgar Mittelholz and Robin Douglas Home. Mittelholzer, a disaffected anti-colonialist novelist, covered himself in paraffin and set it alight. Douglas Home, an aristocrat who dabbled in jazz and suffered from depression, committed suicide a few years after a highly publicized divorce from his wife, Sandra Paul. So how does Curtis describe this? Quote, for men like Robin Douglas Home, the expectation of power had been deeply embedded inside their minds. But as the world had changed around them and real power ebbed away, they were left with a terrible melancholy that in some would turn to despair. So how does Adam Curtis know what was embedded in Douglas Home's mind? Unless Douglas Home left a very specific note, how would Adam Curtis know whether or not his feelings about power affected the decision to take his own life? Adam Curtis reduces the viewer to a kind of flustered traffic cop constantly yelling, wait. Yeah, that's my experience watching Adam Curtis docos. It's like, wait, where's the evidence for this assertion? His narration constantly leaps from a minor detail to a wide claim that sweeps everything off the table. Yeah, I've had people like this on my show that they'll make, mention one detail, they go to this huge sweeping claim, and I'm reduced to a That's what I'm reduced to. Like, I don't want to say no. I want to say yes. This is what I want to do. That's what I want to be, but instead I'm reduced to a flustered traffic cop constantly yelling, wait. The effect is a bit like being buttonholed by a child who begs to skip homework by presenting an impromptu lecture. During a segment in episode 4 about Deng Xiaoping, the former leader of Communist China, and the trial of the Gang of Four, These were big Communist Party officials, I think, under Mao. Adam Curtis quotes Mao's widow, Zheng Jing, as yelling, "I am without heaven and a law unto myself. It is right to rebel." She is removed from a courtroom. This checks out. It's been reported elsewhere. But then Adam Curtis pole vaults into his own realm, where he sees a bigger picture all his own. And then that force that Zheng Jing had prophesied, individualism, re-emerged. She does not, in this series, prophesy any such thing. Maybe this is a reference to the democracy wall, though individualism seems an odd way to characterize collective resistance to Deng Xiaoping's repression. Or maybe Adam Curtis is tying individualism to another quote when Zheng Jing called herself a unit of one. This is a strange brief for Zheng Jing as the avatar of individualism, Mao's widow, as she spent much of her life as a member of the Chinese state, a figure of institutional power. Her struggles read most easily as a traditional jockeying between political factions with perhaps more power than usual. In episode 3, Money Changes Everything, Adam Curtis narrates the introduction of Valium and how Arthur Sackler helped market it. Valium had touched on something inside human beings, but nobody knew what it was. What it was. White nation. Valium does indeed go inside the human being, but as Andrea Tone's History of Benzodiazepines, The Age of Anxiety. Have you read The History of Benzos? Great book. The people who made Valium are very much aware of what Valium touched, how it did that, and why. In episode 4, Curtis moves from Valium to OxyContin, with one of those spoonfuls of plummy speaking that makes nonsense sound like news. It was a synthetic form of opium, and it was sold as a painkiller. But then workers who were being laid off as the factories closed found that they got more benefits if they were disabled. So they went to their doctors and said they were injured, and the doctors gave them OxyContin. They got their benefit, but they also discovered that OxyContin made them feel safe in a bubble, protected from the anxieties and the fears of the new post-industrial world. So this is a cinnamon roll of awfulness, just spirals of doughy suggestion interleaved with spicy mendacity, which is a fancy word for lying. So imagine being injured in an accident, you're getting hooked on OxyContin, one of the most common ways people get addicted. There you are fighting through recovery, listening to this stranger tell you that you are taking Oxy to protect yourself from fears of the new post-industrial world. And oh, also, you are a scammer. In episode 6, Adam Curtis says that millions had become addicted to opioids, and yet no one in power had come to rescue them. Well, Purdue Pharma has been fined billions of dollars for illegal behavior. Occasionally, other people's efforts appear inside his own, uncredited. So, what we've got here, just as anti-Semitism was a socialism of fools, conspiracism is the class struggle of experts who are not situated anywhere in particular, not in society, nor along a political or ideological spectrum. So Adam Curtis is like a flat-fee conspiracist, obsessed with elites and politicians and the system, kind of like kids under the covers overhearing grown folks talking, reducing complex relations to Star Wars set pieces. So obediently, in an Adam Curtis film, every group, every individual that might seem to offer agency or resistance to the system yields the true gold of the paranoid, always already defeated. Because Adam Curtis is unable to reconcile his positions and move toward a coherent reading of history, we are forever stuck in the early developmental stage of the paranoid, sensing menace and incomplete parts, terrified of change. In Adam Curtis films, the bad news seems to be the only real news, and it is always uncovered in the same way. The banks take over. A high-minded experiment fails. The sexy Soviets come marching in, and an unidentified black American nods off, too high to act. There's this kind of left figure, but not really on the left, tends to think of power entirely in terms of systems and organizations and elites. Kind of a lefty media sphere, doesn't see anything happening except the elites making decisions and producing discourse, which is not really the way societies and economies work. Adam Curtis films purport to be about us, but the paranoid writing dominates, and the viewer is left with unknown anxieties projected onto known images, a sort of emotional break-in. Adam Curtis can't seem to get Adam Curtis out of his head, and I'm not sure that his films tell us about anything else. In his 2010 film Richard Nixon, Paranoia and Moral Panics, Adam Curtis declared his emotional history a universal one. This is a film about how all of us have become Richard Nixon. Just like him, we have all become paranoid weirdos. Probably didn't realize that we've all become Richard Nixon and paranoid weirdos. It's the story of how television and newspapers did this and how it has paralyzed the ability of politics to transform the world for the better. But then in the 1990s, the journalists became even more like Richard Nixon. Like him, they started to see hidden enemies everywhere. So Adam Curtis insists that he is a journalist, but as the narrator of his own films, he is compelled to dismiss journalists. This is pure paranoid fragmentation. You've got a paranoid individual like other paranoid individuals who insists on being unlike or the others. He is everywhere and nowhere. So for Adam Curtis, all human behavior is some kind of cloud of intention that can be tracked like a flight. Distinct forces play against distinct forces without any complications or chance or constraints of detail. One scientific blunder becomes the failure of science itself. One overeager journalist becomes the whole field of journalism. Eras and cohorts and ideas are all smooth circles rounded off by the totalizing buff of power's sneaky omnipotence. Okay, here's the end. Notice how many times Curtis uses the word nothing and everything. Very literal reporting can stand up to these kindergarten words. By choosing a category that doesn't exist, can you name an actual everything, an event that does nothing, that never admits to exception? Adam Curtis is making clear that reporting means little to him. The appeal of conspiracizing for Adam Curtis and his followers is exactly this unverifiable fog, this woolen hug of futility. If nothing can be done, inactivity looks normative. If nothing can be done, then let's have a drink and take drugs. Conspiracism is the enemy of action. The group takes action, counts its wins and losses after the day, but the conspiracist answers scrawled on his hand, hangs back, cynically tells a story about why it never would have worked anyway. Adam Curtis and his cohort love the idea of a grand story that never needs to be revised or reported. The darkest and the largest forces always win. They have already won. Adam Curtis simply confirms the bad news.